Welcome back to the show. Great to have you along on a Wednesday evening. Came across a pretty interesting story. A woman writes that her husband received a notice that child support is being sought for a 16-year-old residing in another state. It's a story from the U.S., okay? So bottom line, this woman's husband had a one-night stand with the girl's mother, and when she became pregnant, she told him she didn't want anything to do with him and to leave her alone, which he did. Now, 16 years later, he's received a notice that she is seeking child support and back child support, retroactive to when she was born, for her daughter. And the woman says, I know the first step is to get a paternity test to make sure it's his child, but I'm trying to figure out what the impact could be financially. Can she get back child support for the full 16 years? Obviously, different states, different provinces have different laws. But to talk about what would happen if that case were to happen here, Laura Paris is with us, family law lawyer at Shulman Family Law. Hi, Laura. Thanks for doing this.
Hi, Barb. Thanks for having me.
Is this a really unusual thing, or do cases like this come up from time to time?
Cases like this definitely come up from time to time. I mean, it's as much as we'd like to believe that these circumstances don't happen, they do. So yeah, definitely. I mean, I haven't personally seen it, but I've seen it in case law for sure.
Okay, so let's start with if somebody were to be approached by somebody else saying you have a child and we had whatever, get the paternity test, right? Get the DNA test.
That would definitely be the first step. I mean, there's obviously some uncertainty and I would say mistrust if after 16 years you have someone coming to you saying, hey, by the way, you have a kid. So definitely if someone walked into my office and said, this is a letter that I received, the first thing off the bat I would say is, okay, let's first make sure that this is actually your child. And then once we've confirmed that, then we can talk about what the implications may be.
All right, let's talk about the implications, because I'm sure if this comes, the woman doesn't say whether she knew about this. Probably not, right? This one night stand. But can you imagine one day to the next, somebody comes into your life and says, you have a child, and you're thinking as a couple or as a family, how much money are we going to have to pay for this child we didn't even know existed?
Right. So that's actually, you touch on a really, really important point. So actually the law has developed in a way now for the reason that if someone comes to you after 16 years, 18 years, even 10 years, that's a major financial burden that may be coming at you if you owe child support from the day that child was born. So the way that case law is actually developed now, and this is coming straight from the Supreme Court in Canada, is that if you do have a child which you're not receiving child support for, there is an onus on the parent who would be receiving the child support to make efforts to obtain that support. If they do not take sufficient steps in making such efforts, or at least putting, the other party on notice, like, look, I need this support, they can only go back so far, because the court looks at it and says, if someone didn't, especially in a circumstance like this, if someone wasn't aware that they had a child for 16 years, they aren't necessarily going to have the financial wherewithal to gather whatever the retroactive support would be. So what's transpired from this, from coming directly from the Supreme Court, is that you are able to seek back support or retroactive support up to 3 years preceding the notice.
Okay.
So in this circumstance, had this happen in Ontario, this individual would only actually be able to seek support for 3 years prior to her giving notice.
The other thing I was thinking as you were explaining that is, say this husband is in this position where he finds out he has a 16-year-old child, and this person wants retroactive back support for child support for 16 years. It's like he was robbed of knowing he even had a child and being there to see that child grow up. It does seem unfair if there were a state or a province where the parent would be ordered to pay 16 years worth of child support.
Absolutely. And the other thing, the main thing that needs to be looked at when it comes to child support isn't actually a right of either parent. It's a right of a child. So when you're looking at it in that sense, I think that's why the law has developed how it has, where they're not really allowing you to go back further than 3 years, because they do recognize that sometimes these circumstances come up because a parent chooses to be negligent, but in other circumstances this comes up because a parent genuinely doesn't know that the child exists. So by putting this kind of 3-year cap on it, it's accounting for those situations. What a lot of people do think in these situations is, well, if I was deprived the right of having this relationship with my child, then why would I have to pay support? But again, that's where you need to remember that child support is a right that's owed to the child. And just because a parent maybe made a decision that excluded the other parent from being in their life doesn't disentitle them to child support.
Right. Although I think not most, I won't say most, but a lot of people who pay child support feel like the former spouse is taking the money and not...
Well, that's for sure.
Yes, I'm sure you see that all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So now we discussed the retroactive child support portion. If this child turns out to be this guy's child, does he have to pay support moving forward?
Absolutely. So there will certainly be a go-forward support obligation. And this, I mean, in Ontario, especially someone who's around 16 years of age, you're not only concerned about what your go-forward support would be, which is your monthly child support obligation, but also contributions to the children's extraordinary expenses. So if this child is someone who intends on, pursuing post-secondary education, well, not only may you be on the line for the monthly support, but you may also be proportionately sharing the cost of their post-secondary education and other extracurricular activities that they may be involved in.
So I have another question that I have a feeling is going to come up with our listeners, because it would be the opposite of this situation. What if somebody pays child support for 16 years and then finds out the child is not theirs? It's interesting that you mentioned that the support is for the child, right? That the money is owed to the child. Would a person who finds out that's not actually my child be able to get any of that money back?
That's a very, very interesting question. I mean, what I would ask in that sort of circumstance is, how did this all come about? Did you take any steps to confirm paternity? But at the end of the day, child support, you don't have to be a biological parent to have to pay child support. Sometimes in circumstances where we're dealing with blended families, for example, a child support obligation can actually arise just by virtue of the child looking to you as a parental figure. So you may not be that biological parent. So in that sort of circumstance, what I would look at first is, what's the actual relationship between the party and the child? Did they have a relationship? Was the relationship to the point that the child would have considered that individual a parent? Because if that's the case, then the support would arguably be proper. If there was no real relationship, and then it comes to show that there wasn't actually this wasn't actually a biological parent, that's a different story and a very interesting question, which I'd want to look into a bit further before I gave any comments on.
All right, yeah, no, I can just see people thinking, well, what if it were the reverse? And yeah, so anyway, it's interesting stuff, and I do appreciate your opinion and your advice and giving us the answers to the questions. Laura Paris, it's always great to talk to you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Laura Paris is a family law lawyer at Shulman Family Law. And I want to put the question out to you, because there are so many, I guess, angles and possibilities when it comes to things like child support. Now, I can't imagine there's anybody out there who has been contacted about a child they didn't know they had and were told you have to pay child support. If you're out there, I want to hear from you. 416-872-1010. Do you have an unusual child support situation? Laura did mention that sometimes people can pay child support even if they are a non-biological parent. And also, are you someone, because I know a lot of people resent paying child support because they feel like their former spouse is using the money for themselves, not for the child. Anything you want to talk about regarding child support, we are here at 416-872-1010. It's the night side, 9:15. News Talk 1010, time saver traffic.
We're dealing with ongoing problems out in Milton, 401 westbound past Guelph line, a crash in the center lane. It's causing really heavy delays on the approach. Good news though, 401 eastbound collectors at Victoria Park. We had a problem there. That's now clear. The delay is completely gone. Rest of the major highway, 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 rest of the major highway.